Good evening, all. My name is Reverend Beatrix Weil, and as the chaplain of Rhodes College, it is my honor to welcome you to this interfaith panel on religion and ethics. Thank you all so much for attending this evening's event. Tonight, our distinguished guests will discuss religion, ethics, leadership, and education. It may not seem this way to you, but as a Presbyterian minister, I see this event as an expression of our Presbyterian affiliation. Many people know that Rhodes College is affiliated with the Presbyterian Church USA, but not many people know what that means yet. Our Presbyterian affiliation means that we do events like this, not just that we tolerate events like this, but that we encourage and support and promote events like this. First and foremost, this evening we'll have much discussion, and my goodness, Presbyterians love to talk and talk and talk. Presbyterians will talk about something until there's nothing left to be said about it. It's why our meetings run long. Perhaps more importantly, this evening will also involve brave exploration of different ways of thinking. And it really does not get more Presbyterian than that. Presbyterians love discussion because we value exhaustive and comprehensive searches that lead us closer to understanding the world. This love of discussion and exploration allows us to stand with a posture that embraces pluralism and diversity. Presbyterians know that talking with someone who holds different beliefs from you, it will help you understand the world in a more complete way, and that will help you heal the world. The central task of education at a Presbyterian-affiliated college is to help our students discover how their giftedness is a gift to someone else. This gift is something our alumni pass on to the world by translating academic study and personal concern into effective leadership and action in their communities and in the world. We promote this by exploring every avenue and every tradition we can think of. We promote this by spending long hours reading and even longer hours talking. And we promote this tonight by discussing how different religions and codes of ethics inform our leadership practices. This is Rhodes College. This is it. Welcome. Next, I'd like to invite Rabbi Jeremy Simons to the podium. Rabbi Simons is the director of Hillel programs here at Rhodes College and at the University of Memphis. Please give him a warm welcome. Thank you, and welcome.
Chaplain Weil, you said that Presbyterians can talk for a while. The laughter you hear is coming from fellow Jews. Every week of the year, Jews from around the world read a section of Torah called a parashah, or a portion. Our interpretations of what we read vary, and they can vary a lot. For some, the readings are the literal word of God. For others, they are a holy history, albeit an ahistorical one. Some read in the original Hebrew, while others use translation. There are many ways that Jews read Torah. But what I find to be remarkable is that while there are so many ways, Jews throughout the world are all reading the same Torah at the same time. This week, we are all reading chapters 31 through 34 of the book of Exodus. We are all reading about the story of Moses descending the mountain only to see the Israelites dancing around a golden calf. Which leads to a question. Didn't we read this last year? Yes, we did. And the year before, too. So why the repetition? Like all good questions in the Jewish faith, there are many answers. Without regular review, we'd likely forget. Perhaps there's a detail we've yet to notice, or maybe it's that inexplicable emotion that comes from hearing the words of your bar mitzvah Torah portion read 20 years after your bar mitzvah. The Torah doesn't change, but we do. Not just over the long arc of a life, but even from year to year. Looking at this week's Torah portion, some years we sympathize with the Israelites who stood at the foot of the mountain, afraid and abandoned. Some years we condemn them for their fleeting faith. Some years we see ourselves in Moses, descending a mountain, enraged and alone. Some years we wonder what a world would look like if people stopped smashing stones. Some years when Aaron the priest tells Moses, "When you were gone, the Israelites turned into animals. All I did was tell them, 'Give me your gold,' and I threw it in the fire, and out came this golden calf." Some years we hear Aaron explain that and we believe him. Some years we don't. The Torah doesn't change, but we do. Torah forms a permanent and universal framework for Jewish life. Within that framework, we seek and we find meaning for our lives. I want to take a minute here and acknowledge the organizer of this event, Ben Crane. I've gotten to know Ben pretty well over the last year. I was not surprised when he told me he had been accepted for the HUC Founders Fellowship. Ben is incredibly bright, a proven leader, and undeniably ambitious. That being said, when he told me for his fellowship project he was going to organize a panel with 2 local university presidents, I'll admit I was a little skeptical. But here we are. Ben, from what I understand, the fellowship is not technically a contest, but that doesn't mean you can't win. On behalf of Hillel, Ben, I want you to know that I and we are so proud of you and grateful for what you've done for our community and for all of us here tonight. Thank you. And with that, I want to introduce and call up Ben Crane to continue with tonight's panel discussion.
Thank you all for coming. So as Rabbi Simon said, this academic year, I'm honored to be one of 18 Founders Fellows. This fellowship is sponsored by Hebrew Union College, the Reform Movement Seminary. Each fellow is tasked with enhancing Jewish life on their campus in a way that they see fit. I'm striving to do so through interfaith dialogue. My cohort is comprised of an impressive group of undergraduates that attend schools all over the continent, including Canada. The event that you are now attending is the first product of my work as a Founders Fellow, but it is not the last. Thank you very much for coming. Now I'd like to introduce the panelists and invite them up to join me. Before beginning her tenure as the 20th president of Rhodes College in July of 2017, Dr. Marjorie Haas first taught at various administrative positions at Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and later served as president of Austin College in Sherman, Texas. President Haas holds a bachelor's, master's, and doctoral degree in philosophy from the University of Illinois, Urbana-Champaign. Dr. John Smarrelli Jr. from CBU is the 22nd president there. He's also its first permanent lay president. Over the past 25 years, he has served in senior administrative positions at Loyola University in Chicago, Illinois, and Lemoyne College in Syracuse, New York. A biochemist by training, Dr. Smarrelli earned his master's and doctoral degrees from the State University of New York College of Environmental Science and Forestry. Last but certainly not least is a classmate of mine. Shirwany was born and raised here in Memphis. He's a senior here, and in addition to having been involved in numerous activities both on and off campus, he is the president of our Student Honor Council. Sorry, I apologize. Social, I'm sorry. Oh, I was correct the first time, Honor Council. Helping to nurture the integrity of the Rhodes community. One of the things that makes the school unique is that each student, when they arrive here, takes an oath and signs their name, pledging to not lie, cheat, or steal. It's one of the things that was the most meaningful to me when I made the decision to come here. A devout Muslim, he will begin medical school in the fall after graduating from Rhodes in May. So Rabbi Simons gave you a brief introductory to what a Torah portion was and how it works. Each week, Jews around the world read the same Torah portion. To me, that's quite meaningful. This week, the portion is Tetzaveh, and among other things, it outlines the strict moral responsibility that the Kohanim, or the priests of the Israelites, have. To me, the modern equivalence is leaders in the community. These educational leaders in various positions have a higher degree of moral responsibility, and I'm really interested in learning about their opinions on some of these questions that I have prepared. But first, I'd like each of you to give a brief background of your faith or your religious background for the audience.
Shall we start?
Please.
The host, but I'm a cradle Catholic, actually. I was born, baptized a Catholic in the days before Vatican II. And if you know much about Catholicism, Vatican II was sort of a transformative point in Catholic religion around 1962 or so, where everything changed. We went from Latin to the vernacular language in terms of our services. Things changed dramatically in terms of the music, in terms of the celebration of our liturgy, and it was an amazing time during the 60s in terms of being a Catholic. So I sort of grew up sort of as a pre-Vatican II a Catholic, then became a sort of a post-Vatican II Catholic, and now it's a really tough time to be a Catholic, and I'm going to be as frank as I can be in this. It's a tough time to be a Catholic as the Catholicism has changed, as the world of priests and the issues of sexual abuse and pedophile have been out there. It becomes a real challenge to talk about Catholicism in a very, very positive light as a cradle Catholic, and so hopefully we can get into that in terms of leadership. And so it's an interesting time to be a Catholic, but I'm very proud to be the president of a Catholic university, although I think Rhodes College has more Catholics than Christian Brothers University, so it's also an interesting time to be here, or we're probably more, I'll be talking to more Catholics, but it's great to be here. Ben, I want to thank you for organizing this event. I'm looking forward to participating, so thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ben, and thank you. That was lovely. I've been called many things, but never a Cohen. So I'm also very pleased to be here and to talk a little bit about this. You asked about sort of our religious upbringing, and I was brought into a family in which Judaism was very, very important. I mean, that was very integral to the self-definition of my family. The sort of Jewish experience, my family comes from Russia, and so the immigrant experience, to escape pogroms, the experience of having other family members in East Europe during the Holocaust. I mean, all of that was very present and meaningful in my family and all of those traditions. But at the same time that it was very important to my parents that my sisters and I had a very strong Jewish identity, and at the same time that it was very important that they felt we needed to learn the traditions and the rituals and how to be Jewish. They were not spiritual. I remember as a very little girl, maybe 5 years old, asking my father, does God exist? And he said, well, no. And I think I got a longer answer when I asked him about Santa Claus. But they were almost aggressively atheistic in their outlook. But that, again, I grew up in a form of Judaism where that could be true, and you still had to go to Hebrew school, and I still had to learn these traditions. And for my parents, the identity was important, but the kind of spiritual life was not. And I think my own personal story of my religious adulthood, starting even really from the time I first went to college, was a sort of search to make a spiritual foundation for a home that was already full of things like prayer and food rituals and other kinds of learning. And that has really been sort of, for me personally, my path. And so I sort of think in some ways that maybe this sounds more negative than I mean it. My parents gave me a really beautiful balloon, but it wasn't yet full of air. And my path as an adult has been to fill it with air. So I feel as though now I have both ruach, as we say in Hebrew, the spirit, the breath of my tradition, as well as the form.
Hello, everyone. So just want to first thank Ben for making this possible, and of course for all of you being here tonight. So as Ben mentioned, I was born and raised in Memphis, so native Memphian. I'm the son of two Pakistani physicians or immigrants who came to the U.S. in the 90s to complete the medical training. So from a young age, I was raised with a Muslim teachings, Muslim background, and that's been fundamental to my development and who I am as a person. And as I was just, when we were up here, I began to think, and I remembered how one of the key experiences for me was between maybe 3rd through 8th grade. My friends and I would go to this lady, Aunt Hamida, who would teach us more about Islam and the religion itself, and try to teach us about the values that we can take from Islam and incorporate into our lives to become better people. And think about that, that was actually one of the influential parts of my development. And so from both within the home and from my own experiences, I've always been raised as someone who's devoted to Islam, and I'm proud as a Muslim, considering that we live in a society and country where Islam doesn't get represented very well by media and just by most people in general. So then, for me, living in this kind of environment, I've never felt that the values that Islam teaches is necessarily contradictory to what society holds. But in all of that, just basically want to say that I am a proud Muslim, and go from there.
Thank you, Hamid. This is, I've been looking forward to this for weeks, and to finally see it come to fruition is really meaningful. Thank you for sharing. Dr. Smarrelli, if you don't mind, I'd like you to answer first again. How does your religious background influence your decision-making as a leader on your campus at Christian Brothers?
My religious background, and I'm proud to be a Catholic, so any issues with the Catholic Church, I think are opportunities for us to educate students in terms of what it means to be a Catholic or what the Catholic religion is all about. So as a leader, you look at Catholicism, because I'm fortunate to have CBU is a Catholic Lasallian university. I'll just define it very, very quickly. I mean, we're clearly part of the Catholic faith, but also the Brothers of the Christian Schools, where St. John Baptist de La Salle is our founder. Being our founder, there's a certain mission involved in that. So there's a sort of a twofold mission: a mission of Catholicism, but also a mission of reaching out to students where they are. So as a sort of a Catholic, and going back to your question of the Catholicism, my understanding of Catholicism is that it's a big umbrella, and that umbrella can go in a very mimicking what politics are all about these days. Can go right, can go left, can go centrist, and in essence, there are many Catholics who believe in a sort of a one litmus test Catholic. If you don't believe in X, therefore you're not a good Catholic, or if you don't believe in Y, you're not a good Catholic, or if you don't believe in Z, you're not a good Catholic. And these X, Ys, and Zs can be all over the map in terms of ideology. So what my goal is as a Catholic and as a leader at my university is to instill upon our community a sense that Catholicism has a big umbrella, and you can be a good Catholic yet maybe not consider this one facet of Catholicism as important as the other facet of Catholicism. And that really is sort of a challenge for us, given the polarized environment we're living in, that many folks will believe that if you believe this, then you can't be a good Catholic. And really, that really is the challenge right now, that the umbrella is bigger, and the world sees the umbrella as very, very tiny, and political figures and others. So I've got to really work hard in terms of a leader to instill upon, or to work with my students, and particularly in terms of looking at what it's like to be a Catholic, and that there are many pieces to a Catholicism. The complexity of the weaving of that matrix is very, very complicated.
Absolutely. There's definitely plenty of gray in the world. It's not black and white.
Exactly.
President Haas, you're the first Jewish president at a Presbyterian-affiliated school. How do you feel that your religious background influences?
It's a fascinating question for me to reflect on. This is my third job where I was both the first woman and the first Jewish person to hold that position. And so inevitably, those became features of my own work because they are regularly commented on, talked about, and I needed to learn to embrace that, not to sort of say, well, but what does it matter? Because it does matter, and it matters to a lot of people. And it's, I've learned to embrace both of those identities as symbolic of what is possible, as hopefully inspirational to others to think that that kind of social change is possible, as a symbol of the doors I want to hold open to others more broadly. So that's been, I think, very important in my leadership and my work. Two other things that come to mind. One is when you are a member of a minority religion, you often feel this sort of pressure to be the model person. Whatever I do, people will think, oh, that's what Jews do. And so you do, I think, feel that you have a sort of a higher moral code to live up to sometimes than perhaps you would feel if you weren't being sort of singled out in this way. I have found that I can use in my own thinking, I think that experience of being a member of a minority religion has hopefully helped me think harder and better about what other people's experiences are like, and to recognize not only my own sense of sometimes being on the side of anti-Semitism, the downside of that, but also that, a lot of things happen in the name of whiteness that I don't approve of, and what is my responsibility there to speak out, et cetera. So I think it hopefully has helped me be more attuned and to be able to talk about my own experiences and my tradition in ways that invite members of our community to talk about theirs, so as an invitation. I'll tell you a little bit about my tradition. I would love to hear about yours. We can talk about these things peacefully, happily, lovingly, and still feel that we can be affirmative in our own identities. So modeling that is important. And the very last thing is that it gives me a fabulous set of stories, tropes, symbols to draw on as I'm trying to make meaning for our community. And I come back again and again. And then, of course, it's a personal source of support, because leadership is very challenging. It takes a lot of mental energy, physical energy, spiritual energy. And so having a tradition that I can go to revive myself, I'm not sure I could do this work without that.
Thank you. I can certainly relate to a great deal of that.
Mm-hmm.
Hamid, how do you feel that your background as a Muslim influences your decision-making as a leader here on this campus?
So I would say it influences my decision-making in primarily two ways. So the first way is by abiding by the principles of Islam and incorporating those values within my daily actions and the roles I have on and off campus. So taking the Honor Council as an example, one of the principles that I take into account is service. So then I think that with any form of leadership, you have to keep other people's interests and their well-being in mind, and part of this is being a servant leader. And service is one of the key characteristics of Islam that is taught among Muslims. And so then by being on the Honor Council, I treat that as a responsibility to serving the well-being and the interests of the Rhodes College community. And then on top of that, just aspects of fairness and telling the truth and bearing witness to the truth, which is evident within the honor code that we all pledge to abide by on this campus. And then, of course, within Islam, there's an aspect of hope and optimism, and I like to incorporate that within the way we look at how we, I guess, deal with sanctions. So then, in other honor councils you might have on other campuses, if someone comes before the council and is found in violation, the student might automatically be expelled, even if it's just as minor as cheating on a quiz. Whereas here at Rhodes, and continuing on from the tradition of the past couple presidents, we hope to treat the proceedings as a restorative and rehabilitative process where people can benefit and learn from the entire process and hopefully not make the same mistakes and become better people. So that's the first way that I think my religious background influences my decision making. And the second is, as President Haas mentioned, just projecting a positive image of Islam. So as I mentioned before, representing a minority religion on campus and then within the society, you feel this pressure that whatever you do, can create a lot of impact and can impact people and how they view who you are and your faith. So then the media does not portray Islam very well. And so then I feel that whatever I do, it needs to be done in such a way that people will be able to say, look at Hamid, and he is a Muslim. And this is one representation of Islam that people can see, and is counter to what the media shows. So in that sense, I feel that I act as an ambassador for Islam.
Thank you. Before I move on to the second question, I'd like to draw your attention to the small pieces of paper that are badly cut out on each of your chairs. I am okay at typing. I'm not very good at cutting, and that's very clear. That's a link to a one-question survey. I'm attempting to utilize a SurveyMonkey survey in the place, or partially in the place, of a traditional Q&A. If at any point you have a question that you would like to ask the group or a specific speaker, you can do it in the moment. It's an attempt to have the Q&A be as directly impactful as possible. That being said, there will be a brief opportunity at the end for a traditional Q&A as well. So if you are a traditionalist, as many people would call me, that will be an option. President Haas, I'd like you to answer this next question first. How do you reconcile religious teachings in Judaism that appear incongruous with contemporary life?
One of the things that was really helpful to me in my own development was the discovery of a branch of Judaism called Reconstructionist Judaism. So many people know there's Orthodox Judaism, there's Reform, there's Conservative, and there's also a branch that's a younger branch and a smaller branch called Reconstructionist Judaism. And I had not heard of that until I moved to Philadelphia, where the rabbinical college is, and so there's a lot of Reconstructionist rabbis there. And before that, we had belonged both to sometimes Reform, sometimes Conservative synagogues, depending, often both. Jews, I don't think there's ever been a time in my life when I haven't belonged to more than one synagogue. So at any rate, but when we discovered Reconstructionism, it really helped me formulate an answer to that question. Because Reconstructionism understands Judaism as a civilization that evolves over time. And that is very true, I think, historically, when you actually look how Judaism has evolved. And it made a lot of sense to me that, this is a story of a people's ongoing conversation with each other and with God about how to live in community. And that evolves over time, over a long time. So that notion of thinking about Judaism as a civilization helped me to answer that. The sort of shorthand notice in Reconstructionism is tradition gets a vote, but not a veto. In other words, we don't expect that we just march blithely on, paying no attention to the ways our tradition has interpreted Torah before us. We have a responsibility to that tradition and a responsibility to study it and to think hard about the decisions we make. But we also are not tied inevitably to interpretations that came before us without the ability to think in our own time how to, as Rabbi Simon said, we still have an obligation to read and interpret Torah. That's an obligation on every Jew. So we still have to do that work. And that's helped me a lot. There are times when I really do wrestle personally with how much of a vote a tradition gets, or how much of a veto I'm entitled to get with that. As a family, my husband and I regularly meet we always have a working document that's our shared commitment to how kosher our home will be, how observant of Shabbat will be, how we will interpret and understand the laws of that govern how a husband and wife will be together over the course of a month or a time. So we renew our vows around that periodically with each big move, and we think about what that means. But we always have some commitment to those things, though they may not always be the same commitment over time, and they may not look like necessarily the sort of commitment that you might think of if you think about, black-hatted Orthodox Jews.
Right. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Hamid, how do you reconcile the same issue with regard to Islam?
So for this question, I think I'd like just not beat around the bush and just just use an example. So for example, in Islam, homosexuality is not allowed and is looked down upon. But I think one way we can approach that, considering the values of contemporary life, is that in Islam, it teaches that whatever land you live in, you should follow the law of that land. So in the US, homosexuality is allowed. So then I cannot discriminate against someone else if the law of the land says that homosexuality is allowed. And then going beyond that, even if it's a value that isn't necessarily prescribed in law, and I think that whatever you personally believe should not be imposed on others. So then, even if I were to be against homosexuality, then I would not treat someone else poorly or worse off simply because they believe in homosexuality. So in that sense, there are some values within Islam that go against contemporary life, but I think that you just have to realize that the personal beliefs you hold should not be imposed on others as well.
Thank you. Dr. Smarrelli?
This is one where I believe religion should help guide contemporary life and not be a sort of a chasm between contemporary life and religious beliefs. And I think that's where, in terms of Catholicism, I go back to my analogy of the umbrella being very, very large. And I can even go to Hamid's example of homosexuality, where there are probably many Catholics in this world who say it's sinful, it's wrong. Yet there are many others who say this is love between two individuals, and Jesus is love. And so why would that be incongruent with our Catholic religion? Really, that's what I try to do in terms of the way I look at these apparently incongruent sort of pieces, where many who are also Catholics will say this is not right or this is sinful. Yet the way I see many of these things is as opportunities to say, how do you twist it? I should say twist, but how do you interpret it in a more positive way to say this is a way of increasing love? Two people who love each other are together. What's wrong with that particular aspect of life? And really, that's the way I've approached a lot of it, and in a very, very similar way to Dr. Haas in terms of the way she approaches her own faith. And in many regards, let's work through what would the higher level say, because what would Jesus do in this situation in terms of two people loving each other, or other of those aspects of religion that appear to be incongruent? And I try to sort of take it to transcend it. And I'm not a clergy, I'm not a priest, I'm not a brother, but yet I view my faith as very, very important to me, and I view the positivism of what Jesus did on this earth to sort of say I can interpret these things in a very, very different way than maybe another colleague who might be Catholic.
Thank you. I can't see the future. In the planning of this event, I was at many times hoping or wishing that I could. Would people come? Would it go well? And especially seeing it with this question, you're all saying practically the same thing. My part of the concept behind this was to bring together leaders of the three Abrahamic faiths, that all have their roots in the same place, and see just how different we supposedly are. And I'm really struggling to see marked differences, and it's been very meaningful to listen to.
I think of that as, there are many different ways to be in conversation with God. And I think the more we can embrace that and support each other in having those conversations, and of course support those for whom, like my father, for whom there is no God, so how would you possibly be in conversation? I think the richer our lives become. I never feel that interfaith dialogue takes anything away from me as a Jew. I always feel it enhances my own understanding of what this could be, and it inspires me to live my tradition more deeply. I also think that one of the great things and great hopes for me about being an American and living in the United States is that it's a place where there might be peacemaking among religions that are often in conflict. And if that great peace is going to come, I do think it might come from here, from the United States, and from these kinds of conversations, and then spread outward to the world.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you.
It's funny that as Rabbi Simons was talking about, you're reading Exodus now. In fact, if you look at the liturgy for the masses during the day, we're actually reading Genesis. So I guess that means the Catholics are behind the Jews in this whole, in our religious traditions or whatever. But as you were mentioning that, I was thinking about today's reading, and it's Genesis today. So we're a little bit behind you folks.
So Hamid, it's your turn to bat. You have a choice. You can either answer who your contemporary thought leader is, or if you prefer, you can talk about the most inspiring person in your faith tradition and why.
So I guess I'd probably answer both, honestly. So then within the, I guess, contemporary leader, the most pertinent example to me is Sheikh Yasir Qadhi. Many of you might know him just as Professor Qazi. He teaches here at Rhodes, although he will be gone after May. Honestly, just Google his name. You'll find tons of lectures online teaching about Islam, and he's a world-renowned scholar. And so I've learned a lot of lessons from his teachings because one reason that I can relate to him is that he was born and raised in the U.S. and then attended the University of Medina before coming back to the U.S. and receiving his PhD from Yale. And just to have that perspective of being born and raised in the U.S., he understands the struggle, I guess, of balancing, I guess, conservative values and liberal values. So the conservative values of Islam and liberal values of the U.S. So then it's easier to relate to someone, a scholar, when he's going through something that you're kind of going through as well. And then, of course, when looking at someone through the faith tradition, the most obvious example is the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. All Muslims use him as an example of how to live life. And we always try to take lessons from the way he treated others and just the way he lived his life. And just beyond the Prophet and Sheikh Yasir, since I'm not a religious scholar, I don't always keep track with contemporary thought leaders. So then the kind of main influences for me in my religious upbringing are my parents, who I believe are the best parents in the world, and then my group of friends, my friend group. Because I think a lot of people don't realize how much of an impact your friends or the company you keep has on you. And I've been fortunate enough that the friends that I have kept have been devoted to Islam and have allowed me to become a better person as a result as well. That's my answer.
Thank you, Hamid. Dr. Smarrelli?
I'd like to, when I was in college and you know, you're struggling with your religion and your spirituality, it's a time of struggle, a time of development. I was very, very fortunate to get involved in reading a Jesuit priest by the name of Teilhard de Chardin. Again, a French, he was paleontologist, but also a priest. And his work actually looked at the sort of the merging of faith and science, and how do you merge faith and science. And if you look at some of his readings and, you know, How I Believe, and a few of the other books that he has written over the years, and he just died maybe 30 or 40 years ago right now, so he's relatively a modern philosopher, priest, etc. What you looked at here was a sort of a positivism about Christ and the fact that evolution is occurring on a daily basis, and the way Teilhard described evolution is the broadening of our spirituality, a cosmic Jesus, not a static Jesus. So in the days of the church, it used to be you look at Orthodox, very, very, very static, no movement. The way Teilhard interpreted faith, the way he interpreted science, the way he interpreted religion, was an evolutionary process leading to a greater spirituality, a greater understanding of the world, and this is going on now on a daily basis as our consciousness sort of increases. It really is it's fascinating reading, and for me as a scientist by training, it certainly brought faith in science to me, and really probably had kept me as a Catholic, because I can put his readings, his studies, in terms of Catholicism, that the Catholic, you can be a Catholic and still believe in evolution. You can be a Catholic and understand an evolutionary process because of Chardin's work. And for me, he's always inspired me, and he sort of has kept me, sort of believing very strongly as a Catholic in what my scientific beliefs are. So they weren't, again, incongruent with each other, but in fact coalesced very, very nicely with each other. Now, clearly, he took a lot of abuse, from the church, from those who believe that the church should be more static and not change dramatically. But eventually, as the Vatican II came about, Teilhard's work was accepted by many, and actually many of the popes wrote about that work of the movement of science and faith. Now, if you look at the church in terms of climate change and in terms of some of the other approaches of service and Teilhard was perfectly consistent with those. And so really his work is very, very consistent with the way I look at Catholicism, the way I look at science and faith.
You see, I don't find it surprising that a man of science would find inspiration in another man of science reconciling these things, but I do find it to be particularly insightful. Also realizing now that Hamid and you are both men of science, and the two Jews on the stage are both philosophers. I don't know if I don't know if that says something about the Jewish tradition.
You should be ready to pack up at a moment's notice, so you can't have a lot of scientific equipment holding you back.
But we do have a lot of books.
Yeah, that's true.
5 to be exact. So, President Hawes, who is your contemporary thought leader?
Well, let me start by maybe saying you had also suggested, who do we find spiritually meaningful in the whole tradition? And I'm always very impacted by Ruth and her story, that notion of just the radical choosing of, you may know the story, so her husband dies, was not Jewish, her husband died, and her mother-in-law is going to go back to be with the community, and she says, I want to go with you. And she says, where you go, I'll go, and your people will be my people, and your God will be my God. And that vision of family making and that vision of community making is just really meaningful to me. And I think about it a lot, and I return to that story a lot. I also think a lot about Jacob wrestling with the angels. He goes to sleep and he dreams the angels are coming down and up the ladder. And then at another point, he wrestles with an angel. And I think about who those angels are. And sometimes when I'm going through a really difficult time, I think to myself, oh, maybe I'm wrestling with an angel. Maybe this is the thing. I'll limp afterwards, but I will be, So that vision and thinking about the many ways in our Torah that angels come to visit, and they're always in the guise of people. You don't know they're angels, that's the thing, until later. And so I try to remember, could be any one of you might be the angel that I'm looking for. In contemporary work, I do a lot of different kinds of reading. Lately, I've been reading Abraham Heschel, not contemporary, but in the grand scope of Judaism, pretty contemporary. And I go back to his work often if I'm feeling a spiritual drought, because his work is really moving to me. And he was trained both in sort of rabbinic Judaism and also in what was then contemporary European philosophy. And as a philosopher, that mixture is really appealing to me. And so being able to see that in one person, and his work is very uplifting. He's a phenomenologist, and it's like, oh, right, that's right, God right here, all around us. So that's been inspiring me lately.
Thank you. I actually just finished working with Ruth, and now I'm working with Heschel. So
There you go.
and again, it's unsurprisingly the Jewish philosophers are a little bit in line. So now, taking from the Q&A, thank you for using this new foreign technology.
So modern, I know.
Hamid, if you're okay starting. How would you recommend handling situations where your religion is being aggressively criticized?
That's a good question. So I think part of it is that you have to approach the situation with a sense, an open-mindedness and understanding. So perhaps the person who is trying to criticize your religion, or trying to perhaps get underneath your skin, is perhaps coming from a point of view where they either have false information or just limited understanding of who you are, what the principles you hold true to yourself. And so in that sense, I think you have to just realize that you just have to be open-minded in that kind of situation, and just hope that it's just like a one-time instance as well.
President Haas?
Well, as you know, Jews know the only people who are supposed to criticize Judaism are Jews, and we do it all the time. I mean, that's one thing. But, you know, I think it depends on the nature of that criticism. You know, obviously overt anti-Semitism is abhorrent as any bigotry is, and has to be faced and addressed as strongly as you possibly can. Sometimes what might sound at first like a criticism, I often realize later is really a question, and so I try to respond to it that way. I think the thing I have the most trouble dealing with, you know, overt criticism or somebody's anti-Semitic, you avoid them or what have you. But I've found it very difficult over my life to respond to well-meaning people who somehow believe that Jews have to convert to Christianity. And that sort of, well, I love you, and so I want this for you. That's very difficult to deal with because it doesn't feel like love. It feels a lot like hate. And even when it is brought forward by someone who I can see genuinely believes that this is important. And I've tried, you know, over the years to, sometimes I just don't engage it. Sometimes I try to engage in a dialogue. Sometimes I say I just don't have the energy for this. But that's in some ways been harder personally for me to deal with than overt expressions of anti-Semitism.
Yeah. President Smarrelli, can you share?
There are times when, and particularly I'll talk about now being a Catholic and what's going on in the Catholic Church, particularly pedophile. I mean, there are going to be times when you just got to say, I agree. We made a mistake as a religious organization. And what can I do as a leader, particularly at a college or university, to say, okay, here's the mistake, but what is the solution to these mistakes? How do I strengthen the religion in terms of that? Because I think there's a certain consensus now that there were so many terrible mistakes made by the church, by the leadership of the church over many years, and now it's come to everywhere is releasing names of priests and bishops and others who are accused of being pedophiles. In fact, you know, if you look at the Commercial Appeal this week, there is Bishop Dozier, the first bishop of Memphis, who is accused of being potentially, even though he's been dead for 30 years or 35 years, these things continue to come out. So it's sort of the what's going on now. So what do you say? You got to say, yes, this occurred. It's the wrong thing to have happened, but what can I do now in terms of solution to this? I mean, many are just saying, I'm leaving the church, I'm done. My faith isn't strong enough to do that. My approach is I've got to say, no, I believe in the Catholic Church, I believe in what we can do, but we've got to make a number of changes going forward, and it's my responsibility as a leader to sort of make those changes or to work with my students, because ultimately it's going to be their religion that they're going to have to embrace as we go forward. So you can take two options in that. You can just go away and leave and say, can't do it anymore, I'm not going to services, I'm not going to be a part of it, or I can be part of the solution. And really that's sort of what my approach has been. Let's be part of the solution, let's work behind the scenes if I have to, or let's sort of find ways that one, the victims are taken care of, because clearly that's one of the major issues are you know, how many lives have been destroyed because of the victims, but even more importantly, how is this hierarchy led to this abuse, and how do we change that hierarchy in many regards?
Absolutely. We have time for one more question. President Haas, what is it like to be what has it been like to be a Jew in Memphis in the short time you've been here so far?
It's been great. I see many Memphian Jews right out there, and it's been a very welcoming community. It was very nice to know that we were coming to a community that has such vibrant Jewish life. We've lived in places where that's been true and places where that's not been true, and they both have their different joys. And when it's a small community and there's just a few of you, everybody participates. And I'm fortunate that Rabbi Bonheim, who served one of those small congregations in Texas that we were part of, is here. But it's also wonderful to see the kind of vibrancy of Jewish life here and to be part of that and to kind of enter into it. It's also, been very interesting to me to learn the history of the Jewish community in Memphis. And it's a history that, as most religious histories, has many highs and many lows. There's certainly a pride here and a sort of, I think, vision of what Jewish life in Memphis means that's shaped even today by the roles that many of the rabbis in town played in the civil rights movement. I think that's still part of the identity of Jewish Memphis. And that has been appealing to me as well, too, that notion that Jews in Memphis see themselves as part of a broader community and not just focused on us and our own group.
Thank you. Hamid, how was you were raised here?
We do need a good Jewish deli, though. Let me just get that right out there. We do not have one.
So then, I think I've been lucky to have been raised within Memphis in the sense that Memphis has a very strong and united Muslim community. So I think that the community size is just about right because in other bigger cities, what you see is that when the community size becomes too big, oftentimes the community becomes fragmented and begins associated with just one mosque, and so then you lose that sense of community and unity. So in that sense, Memphis, the Muslim community here has been very influential in my upbringing, and that had the community not been strong here, I don't know if my ties to Islam would have been as strong. Yeah.
Absolutely, community is important. Dr. Smarrelli, what has it been like to be a Catholic?
Again, as a Catholic in Memphis, we're probably 2 or 4% of the of this population. So we're a very minority population. So it's been interesting in terms of interacting with the church at every corner here in Memphis that we see that it's unusual for a Catholic to see that. In essence, it's I think we've been viewed, Catholics particularly, even before any of this other stuff came out, as sort of maybe soft Christians. We're not the hard Christians of Memphis, and so we've got to continue to interpret the fact that we believe in Jesus Christ, we believe in the love of Jesus Christ. We're not as hard. How to describe the religion better than that, but we're not the same as the Baptists, for example. And even though the majority of our students at CBU are Baptists, we're not Baptists in terms of the way we practice our religion. So it's more of us, going back to what Dr. Haas says, I think it's the greatest thing. It's all about the dialogue. How do you dialogue with individuals in a very respectful manner so that you can explain your faith tradition, they explain their faith position, and we may not agree on exactly how we worship, but in fact there is an honest and cordial and dialogue that goes on so that we both understand each other better as we lead this conversation. I think that's what it's all about. It's all about relationships, all about the conversation that happens, and that's again, as an optimist, I believe strongly in the power of conversation.
Absolutely, that's the same optimism that led me to invite all of you here tonight, which leads me to one last thing before my closing remarks. On behalf of Rhodes, we would like to give this gift to you for joining us here tonight on our campus.
Well, thank you. Thank
you very much. Thank you very much for coming.
I guess I'm the only Rhodes outside. Conversation, right? The CBU Rhodes conversation.
I wanted to give you a big Rhodes sweatshirt, but I figured you probably can't wear that on campus.
So I'm thankful to Dr. Smarrelli, but I have many people to thank. I'm so very thankful to Hebrew Union College for sponsoring this fellowship, and for Rabbi Anna Bonheim, the director of the fellowship, who came all the way here from Charlotte to be here tonight. I'm also indebted to Rhodes College for its overwhelming support of student endeavors like this one. This event could not have happened without President Hawes and her incredible staff. Chaplain Beatrix, Weil, and Rabbi Simons were integral in helping me plan this and tweak it and reconstruct it, and continue to support me even in moments of anxiety and fear and what if no one comes? So I'm glad that all of you are here. I also owe Kim Bennett a great deal of thanks for helping me with the logistics, as well as, of course, the communications office and physical plant for everything they did behind the scenes. Last but not least, the panelists and all of you who participated in this conversation. So thank you very much. I hope that this is just the starting point of interfaith dialogue on this campus, and certainly not the end of it. Thank you for coming.